true success is 75% in my book. And you can tell me if you disagree with me on that one, Jonathan, but that's kind of how I've conceptualized it. Like, we shouldn't be shooting for 100% because we're still human. We're going to make mistakes. And the all or nothing mindset of our culture is where we don't typically stick with stuff.
We are back. If you're watching over on YouTube, which I hope you are, if you haven't yet, click anywhere on the screen and subscribe. Or if you're listening, click down in the show notes and go subscribe to our newly launched YouTube channel. It is all things mental health made simple. It is practical. It is fun. And we think you would love it, not to force you to do something, but we'd appreciate it if you gave that one a subscribe. If you are watching this, things look a little bit different. We've had a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces, parts, and as with everything, we try to stay consistent. My office looks a little bit different if you're catching this. So it's been a lot of work getting that set back up to the way it is mostly functional. It's not perfect, but it's practical. But Mark and I are back, and we are going to dive into something that I know I struggle with. Well, I want to back up. I want to say struggle because I don't want to come in feeling like negative. I think something that I'm aware of that I would argue the vast majority of people are not aware of, and we want to simplify it. So, Mark, first off, how are you doing? And as this episode airs, the previous episode regarding forgiveness versus reconciliation and what we get wrong, you had a conversation. Has there been an update to post that to the post side of that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation went well. I think, but I kind of just left it as a honoring their stepping into wanting to reconcile, and I chewed on it for a little bit. I told them I needed to chew on it. It was kind of in some ways a tough pill to swallow. I didn't tell them that, but like it was hard.
Are we still chewing?
Yeah, I wanted to sit with it for a minute. And so I responded last week and just said, thank you for being courageous to step up and to be obedient and to engage in a conversation. Thank you for owning what you did. And I really appreciate it. And if our paths, blessings on what you're doing, and our paths will probably cross again, and it'll be good to see you when that happens. And I just left it at that. And then I haven't got any response. I didn't expect a response, right? So I'm not in that, like, I'm looking for any kind of relational reciprocity or growth in that relationship. But I've had to wrestle with my own cynicism. Oh, they just did it because they wanted me to apologize for something too. And so I sat back for a minute and go, okay, was there anything that I needed to own during that? And that's like 8 years ago, right? So is there anything that I need to own in that part of my own journey that I needed to apologize for too? Is that what they were looking for? Kind of, I had to go down I went down that cynical path for a minute. I had to stop myself and go, no, I'm just going to take it for what it is. Not going down that path. If they respond, great. If they don't respond, not a big deal. I have moved. I'm moving on is kind of my decision that I made.
Right. I mean, you're moving on again, but you had moved on for, a decade. So it just, I think it shows that one, time doesn't heal all wounds or really any of them. We just move beyond them and sort of,
you grow around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like, you'll see these stories where sometimes they'll cut down an old tree and then they'll be like, sparks are flying, and you'll see like this tree had grown and it looks super healthy, and there's this one little spot. At first it's like turned in and grows, and as the tree gets bigger, it grows over top of it where like an old chain had been left on it, and the chain like grows into the tree and it becomes around it. And on the surface at some point you can't see anything other than just like the bark looks different. Once they cut it over, you'll see like, oh, the chain was once there, then it, like the tree like had to grow and it forced itself around it, and then that chain is still there, it's just no longer noticeable.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So well, that's good. I know you probably weren't expecting to give that update, but
no, it's good. I love it. We're being honest here, being transparent.
We had said we would provide an update, and I wanted to come back with it. Well, today we're talking about thought patterns and what to do. Like, we have lots of them. I think we think in patterns, and what to do specifically with negative thought patterns. I think that's one that's tossed around a ton. And you'll see it on social media. You'll read it in books. You'll hear clinicians and counselors talk about it, and it's one of those that sounds easy, but a lot of people scratch their heads like, what does that even mean? And do I even have them? And is that something that I even need to pay attention to?
So how many episodes back did we talk about automatic negative thoughts, ants? Cognitive behavioral therapy and CrossFit is what I think the title was, or something like that.
3 episodes ago. I'll link it, or if you're watching, you'll see it up here.
Because in some ways, this is an extension of that to some degree. Would you not? Would you agree?
Yeah, it's just a practical side of, what is it? Do I need to be aware of it? And then what can I do with it? How does it show itself? And then this is not to be like, oh my gosh, it's a big thing. Again, I would just argue, just kind of like in the marketing space, you're either problem aware or you're problem unaware and you desire a solution. And so the goal is to get people to be aware of the pain point, or to become pain point aware, to then move them to the right solution. And so, yeah, I guess this would be a CBT, a practical CBT approach to negative thought patterns.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we're gonna have something. Or there's a tool that I created for some clients a couple months ago that we'll have linked in the show notes, called the Thought Prompt Journal. But here's what happens, and I've talked to people about this all the time. Is our negative thoughts are often, if you think about a reflex, they're often a reflex. And we don't typically pay attention to the patterns until we're maybe 200-300 yards down the road, and we stop and go, oh my gosh, like how did we get here? Like I am just steeped in the negativity around certain things. And but I will say this, I don't necessarily think many of us, and myself included, until I was aware of this, even had that thought. Not it was just like, oh, I'm in a bad mood. Oh, I'm kind of in the dumps, or I'm looking at everything through a cynical lens. And then people are now reacting to me in a negative way, and that just enhances it. So it's almost like we're making you aware of the problem that happens for many of us that we often aren't aware of. We just get stuck, and we don't know why we're stuck.
Right. So just to go real pop culture with it, we're basically all Walter White in some way, if you're ever familiar with Breaking Bad.
Explain
we are all
that,
Walter White in some way.
I am not familiar with that. So
basically, we're just cooking up worst case scenarios in the lab of our own mind. And the only way to break those bad habits is to change the recipe, if you will.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know what Breaking Bad was, Walter White was a guy who needed money and he became a meth dealer.
Okay.
And was a drug dealer. And so bad thoughts, you got to change the recipe. So
that's actually an interesting. I have to do some research on that. I've heard the show. I've never seen the show, but
yeah. So, I mean, basically we all have that in our brain. And if we want to change the thoughts, change the recipe.
Yes. So practically then, how do we do that? And I think that's the hard part. And what I'll say is, and this is just a precursor, but Jonathan and I are in the process of working on a fun project.
Shh, don't say what it is. We're developing a tool.
Yes.
That we think you would like.
Yes.
That will help you along your path to wherever you are trying to go to better your mental and emotional well-being.
So stay tuned, because we will be talking more about that in the months to come. But the reason I say that is you have to allow yourself a runway of change, or you need to give yourself enough time. And so a lot of people get mad at me for this, but I want you to sit with this for a second. You can't change a neural pathway unless you recognize what neural pathway needs to be changed. So now we're creating this kind of cognitive dissonance with you that all of us struggle with negative thought patterns. It's just, I think, a natural way of dealing with things. If we want to change that, now I'm creating this cognitive dissonance where you go, okay, I don't want that anymore. What do I got to do? But you can't just wake up the next morning and go, oh, I'm better, right? You've got to be aware of it. You've got to take some steps towards that change. And it typically takes about 3 cycles of 30 days. It takes 90 days to rewrite a neural pathway. And so here's what I'm going to tell you is we're talking, and if you're wanting to implement, the first 30 days, shoot for 25% change. Like, if you hit 25% change, or you're within that 25% change window, like, be excited. So, like, one in four times you've changed this month. That's actually something to celebrate. The next set of 30 days, it's 50%, right? And then the last set of 30 days, true success is 75% in my book. And you can tell me if you disagree with me on that one, Jonathan, but that's kind of how I've conceptualized it. Like, we shouldn't be shooting for 100% because we're still human. We're going to make mistakes. And the all or nothing mindset of our culture is where we don't typically stick with stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we have a horrible view in our culture of what progress looks like, what, expectations, goals, all of that, and all of it's rooted in perfection. And that's great. I have big, hairy, audacious goals, and that would be, in a perfect world, that's what to accomplish this BHAG, if you will. But when it comes to doing any of those things with change and growth and development, we expect to be a master at something from the get-go because we're taught early on that we need to pursue perfection, versus doing the best you can where you're at with the resources you have readily available, trying to continually to gain momentum, which is actually pursuing excellence and not perfection.
No, it's that mindset, that growth mindset of, I am not stuck with what I have. I have agency. I have the ability to change. I'm going to attempt it, pursue it. And then when I fail, how do I think about my failure as I move forward? And I think that's the hard part a lot of times with different generations, that failure is not an option. Well, failure is life. That happens. So, yeah, I want people to sit with that for a second, is that what would it look like to reorient our mindset around the fact that we are going to make mistakes, and failure sounds so negative, but I think it's an opportunity. And so in this process going, okay, how do I take a step back and go, okay, what worked, what didn't, what can I do differently? What's the next step?
So that's great. I would take it even one step further, because you're like, okay, thought patterns, how do they begin? I think you have to look at the very big word, which you're going to simplify right now, is this idea of neuroplasticity. If you are, I'm going to give an example, then I'm going to reference a television show that I love. Imagine if you are trying to string a line between two trees, and you start with thread, and you wrap this line from one tree to the other, and then you try and hang something from it. It's going to snap.
Mm-hmm.
So then you repeat the process, and you wrap a second line around the tree, and then braid it around the first line. It's a little bit stronger. It still breaks. You're like, okay. You wrap it again, braid it again, wrap it again, braid it again. So what you're doing is every time you make a wrap around those two trees with that one line, following the same path, you're strengthening something. So before long, you have taken one thread and created a rope that can hold, not just one, not just two, but hundreds, even thousands of pounds. You could say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's the way your thought patterns work. So your brain has these things called neural pathways. And every time you have a thought, it becomes easier to have that same thought again. And that pathway becomes, instead of just one thread, it becomes hardened and then becomes the default pathway that you will think or experience or feel something based on some outside force, internal force, or, whatever that may be.
Reflexive flat pattern is what I call it. Yep.
So in TV terms, the greatest television show of all time is The Office, hands down. There's never been a greater television show. There's an episode where Jim, well, every time there's a dinging sound, will just offer Dwight a Tic Tac. And then he just starts doing it and starts doing it and starts doing it until one day he makes the ding, and without even reacting, Dwight just puts his hand out for a Tic Tac. And then Dwight's like, wait a minute, why did I do that? And he doesn't even know. Effectively, he wired a neural pathway in him, or a thought pattern and a response pattern based on every time this happens, then this is going to be the response.
So it's called operational or classical conditioning with the Pavlov dog type of thing, but those things happen all the time. Well, there's I don't, and this is my thought for those that are listening. Has there ever been something where you're like, you just got stopped for a second? You're like, well, why do I do it that way? Where did that come from? Or why did I respond that way? Or why am I reacting that way? Like, those are the best questions you could ask if you want to disrupt or begin to disrupt these neural pathways to create new ones.
And so I know a lot of people are sitting here now like, well, that's great.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
It'll be more confusing, but to even begin to know what of these negative thought patterns you have, and then to even begin to change them, to move through the process of like, what are they thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and then what does it look like to reinforce or rewire? What are some of the types? I know of a couple. You've got all or nothing thinking, putting labels on everything, like very much black and white thinking, not asking questions, mind reading, trying to like pre-think what someone's going to say to you when you're going into situations, or trying to read someone's mind while you're
gosh,
them, because you're trying to write a story ahead that hasn't really unfolded yet.
Yeah, you know what that is though, right? I mean, this is not a conversation from a different time, but that's a trauma response. That's a self-protective, I need to control the room around me, or at least I think I can control, because I don't want to be hurt.
You've mentioned catastrophizing before, and we said we're going to unpack that a little bit more. So camp there for a minute.
Catastrophizing is, in some ways, tied to self-fulfilling prophecies. But it's, see, this is happening again. This always happens. This is the way it always is. Nothing is ever going to change. There's never going to be a way that this is different. And so it's this idea that, it's almost a victim mindset, that I am paralyzed, powerless. This is the way it always happens. This is the way my life always will be. This always happens to me. Why is this, it's taking something small and almost, adding a nuclear option to it that is just, making it 10 to 15 times worse than it really is, but also going into that deep, deep trench of a negative thought pattern that this is always or never, always the way it is never going to change. And then we get into that mindset of kind of, woe is me, life sucks, why has this always happened to me? And there's no ownership. And this is where in my therapy, I'm big on going, hey, we can go there, but you are 100% in control of your life due to the choices you make, in the sense, well, that somebody might say, well, what about outside things that happen to me? Yeah, that's a given. Outside forces are going to happen. But we still have control of how we engage and respond in those things. We're not powerless.
Oh, for sure. I had a situation yesterday where I had heard someone, I was having a conversation with a family member and heard something, and I thought for a minute, and it was like, it immediately triggered a response to like, I need to go to the source of this and ask a question and figure out why. And then I thought about it, and it was like really, it was pushing me. I was like, and then it was a lot of negative thoughts of like, what gives, what the heck, are you serious right now? And then I had to stop, and I was like, wait a minute, take a deep breath. What good is this going to serve? Like, is this going to benefit me in any way? What will tugging at this thread, so to speak, help? And I was like, all right. And then I thought about that for a minute. And then I realized, all right, I'm not going to go pursue this, because at the end of the day, it's not worth it. 2, it's not going to serve me. It's not going to serve anybody else. And 3, it hasn't affected me in the least. And so the only effect on me pursuing this is going to be stress, probably frustration, and that sort of thing. And I was like, yeah, it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And just let it be. But it took being aware of like, wait a minute, this is going on. And so that's a tool, I would say, is developing a discipline of awareness. And then again, I'll always say it, curiosity, ask questions. In this case was interesting because the curiosity part of me was wanting to find answers. And I was like, wait a minute, and then flipping it and asking myself questions and then sitting with those answers like, all right, cool. And then finding some relief in the weight of the chest leaving up, and you're like, all right, I don't have to do that. And then just changing lanes and going a different way, not just jerking off the interstate to come to a screeching halt, but like shifting lanes and saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to know any of this. I don't have to pursue this because it's really not worth it.
Right. Yeah, but let's be really honest for a second. I mean, not that you haven't already, but how did you come to the ability to get to that place? Because I know you know a lot of my story, I know a lot of your story, and I know that's not always the way that you used to respond to the things. Like, so how is, for those that are listening, like from a practical standpoint, like that sounds great. And that sounds like like that's awesome on how that
Right.
you responded to that. How did you get there? Like, what would be a first step for people that are listening if we're thinking about practical? Because I'm gonna uncover a little bit of your stuff. I mean, you've done a lot of hard, intentional self work that you need to be very proud of over the last 3 or 4 years. I've been doing a lot of that same stuff over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. So it takes time. So how do we instill hope? How do we instill like the next step type of thing?
So it does take time, and I'm just going to be very honest. And the reason and everything that we talk about, either on this podcast or within the larger brand of Mental Health Made Simple, is from a place of things that you have learned and taught and that you do professionally because you're a clinician, and things that I have learned and have worked through the process of this. And it does take time. There's no silver bullet. There's no TikTok, no Instagram, no Facebook, no, excuse my language, shitty online quiz that you can take in 5 minutes. It's going to that's going to healthily and correctly get you down the line in a way that's going to give you a good foundation. So you have to build that foundation. And it starts with looking inward. And for me, what got me there is realizing I was a big all or nothing thinker and a catastrophizer. And my emotions, so my thoughts were all or nothing, and everything was either awesome or it was terrible, and I ruined it.
Mm-hmm.
There was no in between.
Mm-hmm. Right.
My emotions were everything's awesome, I'm on top of a mountain. Everything's ruined, well, I'm a failure and I'm worthless, and like, what's the point? My behaviors from those were either I'm screaming along at 100 miles an hour, just like killing it, kicking ass, doing all the cool stuff, showing up, everyone loves me, or I was reactive and bound up and like would, flight, fight, or freeze, I would run the other way into like, oh no, I have to fix this. So, and
Mhm.
then there was no sort of reinforcement there.
Right.
So to get to that place was to realize, wait a minute, all of my stuff is big. I feel it big. I experience it big. It's deep. And I would ping pong from one extreme to the other. And it was learning how to find that middle ground and say, wait a minute, when I feel this immediate like launch from a recoil to go flying back to the other side was to learn to like, I need to slow this down and don't immediately time jump or like teleport to the other end of the spectrum, and learning to untangle, because not everything is great and not everything is terrible. Sometimes things are okay. Like just because something doesn't go as planned, it doesn't mean it's ruined.
And that's where the catastrophizing piece, you've gotta take a step back and go, "Oh, I do catastrophize, so then I gotta do what you just said," I've gotta normalize.
So that was the process for me. And again, I know that probably sounds like, oh, that sounds great. That's awesome that you got there. But it took for me, realizing and being honest with myself and saying, hey, you know what? I am not, to an extent, I'm being lived by my life. And these are all the things that I'm not doing. And I had to listen to other people. I had to go through some like big loss and some hard stuff, and then realize, okay, I'm not going to stay there. I make the choice. I'm going to walk through the other side of this. And then if I really want to change, I need to just do the work.
And so I think practically then for our listeners, it's that what I'm asking you today, I think what we're asking you today is just make that realization.
Yeah. It's you can't solve everything at once. Pick one thing.
This is why we do this show. It's not an Instagram quick fix, 5 steps to do this.
If you commit to, all right, if you commit to working on one thing, and for me, that's how it all started, working on one thing. And that lended itself into, oh, now we can focus on this. Now we can shift to this. Now we can shift to this. And so all the sum of all of them ended up rising, but it started with working on one thing. And just stick with it. If you're driving a car and all four of the tires are out of whack, but somehow you inflate one, and you notice like, oh, and this is a terrible example, and you inflate one, you're going to see on the screen, oh, this one is now normal, and you're going to drive on it for a while, and now you're going to be like, oh, now I want the others to be of the same. And then you're going to fill the other one up, and the other one, you'll probably fill them all at the same time. But if you just start with one, then you watch the screen saying, well, this one is now in the green. All these others are in the yellow. Now I want to get all the other ones in the green too. You're going to want everything to rise with it. And so just pick one thing and work with it.
Well, and so that's what I'm going to say is as you're listening, take a step back. So the thought prompt journal that we've given in the show notes is just asking the simple question, and I'll pull it up real quick, is what it's more about recognizing what just triggered me, right? And so when you get triggered, it's because of something internally or externally that has just happened. It could be an engagement with a partner, a spouse, a kid, a coworker, a friend, and you're now dysregulated. And so if you can't do it in the moment, you can do it after the incident, but just kind of come back to go, okay, what triggered me? What just happened? Why did I respond that way? Where did that come from? And you kind of just write down some thoughts, you think through it a little bit. Oh, and what I'll tell people all the time is that that trigger ceases to be about the other person once you're triggered. Now it becomes about you and your negative thought processing, your negative thought patterns. It becomes about your physiology. And maybe that's the thing you gotta do is just begin to recognize and realize, okay, where did that come from and why did I respond that way? Those are my initial questions when I get triggered. And again, if you're emotionally up in upheaval, you're not gonna ask that question right now. But once you've calmed down, you can look back and go, if you're wanting to change this, you look back now and go, okay, What happened? Why did it happen? Why did I respond that way? And maybe that's your first step.
So for me, what I realized after digging in with this part is that because I had very low self-esteem and very low self-worth, masked in like this forward-facing confidence, but underneath it was like really, and I didn't realize it for a long time. So the awareness piece was first. But then it was coming to an understanding that like I always felt like because of self-esteem and self-worth that when anything happened that was slightly outside or deviated from what my intentions were, I immediately felt like I had done something wrong, and like someone's view of me was now changed forever, and that I needed to justify what I did and validate what I did, and would push so hard into having people say, "Oh no, I understand that." Like I then had to go prove my point. I needed to just respond, and prove my point. No, this is why I did this. This is what was going. These were my intentions. And when I realized that the difference between impact and intentions, and knowing that like, if I can be okay with myself, that whatever happened, that it was from this place with this and with that, regardless of how it was received, and then be okay with the response, like that set me up and helped rewire this need to like send a 15-page email when someone was like, when I misinterpreted, something, or like reactively push someone to get on the phone and have a conversation right now if I thought I'd irritated them, versus being okay to let it sit and be like, this will resolve itself. Like I don't need to like allow fear of, oh no, this is ruined. Oh no, this is destroyed. Oh, I'm not good enough. Like all of those things, or crap, why didn't I do this? I should have seen this differently. Oh no, like this was not how this was supposed to have happened, and then have to fix it right on the spot, or respond in some sort of immediate action to be able to say, okay, wait a minute, let's just stop for a second. Becoming aware of that component of the need to defend myself, the need to convince other people that I was coming from a good place, whether they believed it or not, and then to try and fix something right away, was probably the biggest eye opener in this whole like negative thought pattern thing.
Well, and the biggest thing in that too is, and I hate this, this is our story, so I hate this for you and me. This is what's got us to where we're at, is that parts of our worlds were crumbling around us, and that was what got us to change. And I don't want that for those that are listening. I want people to go, okay, do you have a desire for things to be different just because you want to improve self? I don't want people to get to a place of crisis, whereas where I got in my life was where you got in your life, to that was a catalyst for change. Unfortunately, sometimes that's one of the only ways that things stick, and I know that's why it's stuck for you and it's stuck for me, is that we don't wanna ever go back to that, where we don't ever wanna go back to where we were in those situations, you know?
Oh yeah. I mean, my goal is so that, everyone's going to have a catalyst for some kind of change. And for this, it's going to sound all well and great, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, my world's not crumbling apart. Great. We don't want it to crumble, and we don't want it to fall apart around you. The reason I had to go through it that way is because I just lived a life reactively responding to a bunch of things around me, where now it's like, okay, I can be more proactive. And then the goal in talking about this is, how could you like gauge where you're at, and proactively speaking, if you want to continue to improve your mental and emotional wellness, if you want to have conversations with those around you, or you see something in someone else that may be showing some signs of this is to help you proactively say, oh, wait a minute, how can I think through this? I'm already healthy. How can I be healthier?
Right. Yeah, and it's probably part of the reason that a lot of you are listening to what we're talking about, is that you just recognize that there's always room for growth. You wanna be healthier. That the title, Mental Health Made Simple, kind of intrigued you in some ways. And now you're realizing, okay, a lot of what makes mental health simple is some of these baby steps, some of these first steps. We're moving, we don't have to complicate it. The complication comes in the drive and the willingness to make a change, and the willingness and the drive to stick with it. th like, the steps themselves seem really simple on paper, and they're meant to be, but it's the actual, um, drive and desire to continue in something that might be hard.
Yeah. I think awareness is key. I want to get practical with some tools and then jump in and things that have helped me. And so you add what they actually are and whatnot. So the first one you've heard us say, awareness is key. Think about it. You drive your car with a dirty windshield. You can do it. But it's much easier to see. You feel comfortable and you're safer when you have a clean windshield. And so like awareness is key. Practicing pausing and notice your thoughts before you're reacting. And the only way you're going to get there is to start by noticing what your thought or dissecting what the thought was post reaction, and then beginning to understand it. You'll hear me say curiosity. I ask questions. And then I always go back to, is this thought true? Was it a lie? And what's another way to see this?
The thought prompt journal that we're attaching, I think, is a great way for you to begin this process. But I would encourage you to go back and listen. Was it 3 episodes ago to the CBT conversation? But it's something that is going to seep into and positively affect all aspects of your life. And and I think you're right. It starts with that awareness. Many of us just have not had that awareness until it's, right in front of us because the world is falling apart around us. And I want people to go, okay, that doesn't have to be my story. What can I do right now? And this is where I love it because, and this is maybe another conversation for a different podcast, is that our negative thought patterns create energy. If we want to talk about quantum energy or we want to talk about energy, it causes us to almost emanate this energy that affects people around us.
Oh, the other day I was just rushing in a hurry. Didn't know why. Wasn't even aware of it. Talking about awareness. And I was in the kitchen cleaning up, and one of Michelle's daughters was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, why?" She was like, "You just seem really stressed right now." And I was like, "No, no." And then I thought about it, and I was like, "I am, but I'm not in a bad mood." And I processed out loud, and I was like, "No, I'm not in a bad mood." And I was like, I think I had got my mind in this place of like, oh, we're heading out the door. Now I'm going to deviate and do this thing. But it did. It raised my stress level, and I was rushing and hurrying, and she could feel it. She was like, "Are you okay? Are you stressed? Like, what's going on here?"
Right. And that's where I have to recognize. And so and I love what you did because this is what I'll tell everybody to do. You processed verbally out loud, and that diffuses that energy. Right. So when I'm in a funk, which I've been dealing with the flu last couple of days, and I've, kind of in this, and so I've recognized that how I've been feeling and thinking, and I've been stressed by certain things in life right now that are just things that I get stressed out about. Um, and so I've had to verbalize to my kids, like, "Hey, I'm a little stressed right now. I'm in a funk. I'm struggling with stuff that you don't need to be burdened by as far as like what the issue is, but I wanted to verbalize out loud that I'm stuck in a negative cycle right now." Is what I've shared with my girls, and they're like, "Oh, okay. Anything we can do?" "No, no, I'm working it out. I'll let you know how I'm doing." But what that does is it diffuses that negative energy, so now they're not looking at me going, "Did I do something wrong? Am I in trouble? Is dad mad at me?"
Right. Do you know what it also does I was going to say that what it does is it helps them from creating negative thought processes and mind reading and being like, "Oh no, what have I done?" Like it
And catastrophizing and all the things we just talked about, right? So so parents, if you're listening, the best thing you can do, 1 is awareness, but then 2 is not assuming that how you're feeling is bad. Um, and that how you're feeling is bad and that keeping it to yourself is the best thing. You've got to get out.
Right. Keeping it to yourself seems noble, but it's self-deprecating. And oh, I don't want to be a burden. It's the biggest lie we all tell ourselves. Oh, I don't want to be a burden to anyone. Nobody wants to be a burden to someone, and you're not. The greatest thing you can do for your relationship with your kids, your spouse, whoever it is, your employees, whoever they are, is to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm bringing in a heightened level of stress, or I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling under the weather today. So just want to communicate that's where I'm at. You haven't done anything wrong, and you're basically resetting a baseline, and then clarifying expectations to say, this is where I'm at. You haven't done anything. And it's also honoring to the person, and it's going to keep them from entering into this place of like, do I need to fix it? Because that can sometimes be annoying when you're like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing to fix. Leave me alone. And it keeps them from thinking, oh, I've done something wrong. Next one for me is externalizing. I keep a lot of stuff in my head, and the more that I can get out of my head, and onto paper, it helps. I mean, a to-do list, tasks, whether it's on paper, on the computer, we put in effort into putting those things down so that we don't forget and we can remember to do them. And we have a discipline of doing those things. So with this is externalizing, writing it down, whether it's in a journal. We're going to give you the link to the journal that Mark's been talking about in the show notes. And it gets things out of your head and on paper. And one of the biggest reminders I have is someone once told me, when you write something down on paper, you're making an accountability contract with yourself to understand it, to remember it, and then to actually complete the thing or to work on the thing that you've written down. There's also something that happens when you physically write something down or type it in. You're more likely to remember it versus just saying, oh, I'll remember this later.
Because you'll never do it later.
And then we're not just looking to remove things. We're not trying to Swiss cheese your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. I think it's understanding you're replacing. So you're removing a toxin and replacing the deficiency. My counselor had me do this exercise forever, where I had to make a list of things that I always say, and she'd stop me in sessions and then would then make me in between go write the positive or the opposite of what that statement was. And so instead of, I always mess up, or I'm always late, or I'm always this, or I'm always that, I'm learning to handle this better. I'm learning to do this. I would have preferred to have done that way. It seems super childish, but you will realize, for me, that exercise right there is what got me to admit that, oh, I do have a lot of negative self-talk. And again, it was never in the sense of vocalizing, like, it wasn't as much. Like, I always thought negative self-talk was like, I'm a loser, I'm an idiot, I'm a failure. That is. But more of it's like, why did I screw that up? Dang, why did I do that? That's an all or nothing extreme thought, and that we just get conditioned to say, and understanding how to rewire those or replace those is going to help, instead of making you like Swiss cheese, like fill the holes in the dam.
So, okay, simply, as we wrap up, simply what I want you all to do is just what Jonathan said, like, is to be aware of one way. There might be multiple, but one way that you fall into that negative thinking trap, and maybe take a look at the journal, and go, okay, and this is where the thought prompt journal helps. What is one thing I can do differently when that happens? That's it. There's not this heavens opening up, like, life-altering thing that's going to fix it immediately. It's going to take some effort on your part. This is why I'm grateful that you're listening, and hopefully you're stopped going to the influencers on social media that say, yeah, just do these 5 things and you're going to be better. Like, no, it's what is the one thing that you're aware of that you can maybe enter into, going back to that thread around the tree. Like, what's the first wrap around the tree? Don't hang anything on it yet. What's the first wraparound? Then, okay, what can you do that consistently throughout the week? Now you got the second wraparound and the third wraparound and the fourth wraparound. Now you're braiding it together. Again, don't hang anything on it yet. And what you're doing is just going, okay, like, I can do that. I can do that one thing. I can do that one thing. And for me, that one thing was recognizing that I was triggered and taking a step back before I reacted. That was my one thing. And that one thing became something that step back created space for me to go, okay, what's really going on? Didn't happen right away, but it was a physical reactive, like I physically took a step back in a triggered state from whatever triggered me.
Yeah, it's a win. I just want to be really clear here. You're not trying to stop negative thoughts. It's not possible. And if we were trying to convince you to stop them, it would be just like being brainwashed or having some sort of digital lobotomy. It's not. You're going to have negative thoughts. The goal here is to learn how to not be ruled by them. To say, hey, these things are no longer going to control me. Or, oh, wait, now I'm aware of this. I can actually shift the needle a little bit and help someone else.
Yeah, what am I going to do differently?
So it's a practice. It is not something that to be perfect in. It is something to be disciplined in so that you can raise the level of your overall health.
So again, going back, the first 30 days of this process for you, can you hit 25%? Can you change? Can you be aware of it 1 in 4 times? And then the other 3 times that you're not aware of it, can you come back and reflect on it? Then the next set of 30 days, it's 2 out of 4 times. Can you do that? And then the third set of 30 days, it's 3 out of 4 times. And you're like, but Mark, you're telling me that 1 out of those 4 times I'm going to mess it up. Yes. And be okay with that. It's just the idea of, can I come back and reflectively be aware of things and be asking those curious questions of what could I have done differently after the fact. That's all we're talking about. Awareness, vulnerability, humility, change, reflection is all what we're asking for.
So to sum this entire episode up into a handful of words, or too long didn't read. Notice it, name it, challenge it, reframe it, act differently, repeat. You guys are awesome. We will have some different notes and tips and tools in the show notes. If you haven't yet, subscribe wherever you consume podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Apple, wherever they are. Subscribe to YouTube and explore. We've got some cool stuff regularly releasing over on the Mental Health Made Simple.life website. You guys are amazing, and we will see you right back here next week on another episode of the Mental Health Made Simple podcast.